Emotions are natural, but understanding them takes time. This goes internally and externally. And I think a lot of people fail at both. And personally, I think that I've done a lot to develop my emotional intelligence, and I had to actively work towards it. And it's interesting because while when I say this, it sounds egotistical, it's not the point of it. I think my family naturally has a higher EQ than what the average populace does. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe I was just projecting, because in retrospect, I've looked at a lot of family members and I think they do lack a lot of understanding about emotions, both internally and externally. They don't read it in others, and they don't understand why they're feeling that way themselves. And so while I was younger, I thought that perhaps my whole family was very high in emotional intelligence. And this is me opening up. I haven't actually talked about this before, but I didn't realize this until I recorded this video, that I think I was projecting. I think that because I felt understanding of my own emotions and understood their emotions pretty well and why they were feeling a certain way, and was able to put myself in their shoes, I thought that they could do the same. And I think that this is an issue that a lot of people with high EQs have to face. When I was in high school, I think that I was extra nervous and extra worried about what people thought of me, because I kind of knew what they were thinking, at least from what I could tell by their body language and how they acted. And I think that I misread a lot of it. So in retrospect, there might have been cases where that person actually did like me, but I overthought it so much that I never even acted on it. And maybe that some of my actions that I did take left a bigger impact on others, and I didn't fully realize it. There were people who saw me after high school and said, "Oh my gosh, you were so cool, and I really loved hanging out with you." And I loved that feeling. I'm glad I was able to leave that positive impact on them. And I genuinely like them. I may not have talked to them very much, but it turns out popularity isn't necessarily like you being the popular one. It's more just more people you know. And it turns out I knew a lot of people. At the very least, I paid enough attention to learn their name, learn details about them, and converse with them when I got a chance. While I split my attention quite a bit, and I didn't necessarily work deeply, I don't think enough with a lot of people. I was a teenager. I didn't know any better. Teenagers are more self-absorbed anyways. But my point is, even from a young age, I had that inclination. And whether or not it was due to trauma or something like that, or natural inborn ability, is a whole nother debate. But I think that the ability to understand others and understand myself was the key to what I'm trying to share with you here. Emotional intelligence is an intelligence. You can learn it. It's not something that is completely just fundamental to someone whose ability. There is a book that I highly recommend to everybody, and that is an emotional awareness book, the Dalai Lama and Paul Ekman. So there's a show that used to be called Lie to Me, and they had I think the name was like Paul Lightman or something like that, or Cal Lightman. And so they basically was based off of this doctor. Paul Ekman is the foremost person on basically emotional intelligence. And then we have the Dalai Lama and Buddhism, which talk quite a bit about emotional awareness and how you treat others and that kind of thing. Both of these very influential figures in this space, completely different in their approach of how they teach it, completely had an amazing conversation and was able to overlap what they know. Despite the fact they knew the same thing, they knew it for completely different reasons, and they were able to explore that. I think it's a very helpful way for people to understand who they are and how what they do affects other people. There's also another book, and this is more for the introspective and more for your own impersonal, internal understanding. Peace is Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh. And that book was something that was profound to me. In my last episode, I talked about spirituality, and I talked about a teacher who left a profound impact on me. And George Fizell, the late teacher, I should say, he was always very kind, and he could definitely tell when someone was being genuine. And whenever I asked for help or were reaching out to him, he was always there to be kind and hand out a helping hand. And I remember him loaning me that book and allowing me to read it. I definitely got a lot out of it as a teenager. Moving on, because I don't want to get emotional. I think that you can't understand yourself until you understand others. And so by looking outward, understanding, okay, why is that person upset? Well, break it down to the basic steps. What led them to that line of reasoning? Because reasoning isn't necessarily just logic. Sometimes reasoning could be illogical and emotions-based. And so their reasoning could be false. They could be based on stuff that they projected themselves or that they misunderstood because they don't have the EQ, for example. if they don't understand why someone's acting a certain way, then they might get angry. And so they don't understand why they're getting angry. It's a very cat and mouse situation. There is this mindset behind the emotions pillar where in order to understand others, you have to understand yourself. But the inverse is true too. In order to understand yourself, you have to understand others. So I do think that there's kind of a simultaneous building process you have to do. But I honestly think you need to reach out and understand other people first. And that's how you're going to eventually understand yourself. And the more introspection you do, which meditation would help with that. I mentioned meditation in the last episode. It helps with the mind pillar, the spirit pillar, and the emotions pillar. Generally, mainly the spirit pillar, but it helps with all three. This is something that you can do to push yourself and understand why you're feeling something. So if you're very upset, sit down and try to meditate, or at the very least calm your mind and understand why are you feeling that way. That's the first step. I'm going to leave it on that note. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them below.